All right, we'll get started. So hello, everyone. My name is Jenna Hamid. Thank you so much for joining us for this installment of a multi-part series of public programs in conjunction with Center for Book Art's current exhibition, Interspecies Futures. Curated by Oscar Salguero, the exhibition is the first survey of book works by leading international practitioners from the contemporary fields of bioart and speculative design who have turned to the book as a tool for the proposal of alternative human, non-human scenarios. Today, we will hear from Oscar and Claudia de la Torre, who will discuss the design direction and exclusive details from the making of the exhibition catalog, which is currently available for pre-order. You can visit our bookshop and you can pre-order your copy. I will include the link right here. And we're hoping to ship it out by the end of the month. Claudia founded Berlin-based backbonebooks in 2011 to formalize her own practice and publish other artists' books, creating objects, fields, and spaces in relation to the book as a highly historical and contemporary medium. Backbonebooks performs consistently in a flexible, conceptual, and collaborative process, aiming to open a new perspective into what a book can be. Oscar is a researcher, critical designer, and independent book curator based in Brooklyn, New York, where he runs the Antilibrary, a project that identifies unconventional trends and predicts future attitudes via the study of independent artist books. This program would not be possible without the support of New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, and by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with City Council, and by an award from the National Endowment for the Arts. We would also like to acknowledge the support from our vibrant community. While donations aren't expected or necessary, it is certainly appreciated. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Oscar and Claudia.
Thank you, Jenna. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. We've been working so hard on this catalog with Claudia, and we're so excited to finally really talk about it and discuss all the details and conceptual ideas that that came with it. So, Claudia.
Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm also really happy to be here and to finally hold a copy in my hands after more than 6 months of working together in tandem with Oscar. And before we start, I just want to thank CBA and Oscar for the opportunity to make me and give me this platform to rethink again what a catalog can be. So I hope you have fun as much as we did.
Yeah, so very quickly, this is the first catalog that I have worked on. This is as an opportunity with this curation project, Interspecies Futures. So I couldn't think of a better person than Claudia. Claudia is someone who I met at the Printed Matter Art Book Fair in 2018, when she received an incredible award for one of the best emergent practices. And I really recognized that her work was quite special, quite conceptual. And so instead of thinking of a regular graphic designer for this catalog, I decided to reach out to Claudia and see what happens. So this is the results. So this is the making of the Interspecies Futures catalog. And I will say first that as I was developing this concept, one literary genre that really stood out like as a very significant and influential genre was sci-fi. A lot of the artists that are included in this exhibition come from a bioarts perspective, critical design, speculative fiction, and all of them are creating proposals for new sort of interspecies interactions into the future. And from my personal conversations with them, there was a lot of influence of sci-fi into the work. So with that in mind, one of the first things we did, like Claudia and I, she's based in Berlin, I'm based in New York, we went to different bookstores, secondhand bookstores, and started to see like why this what makes this sci-fi paperback so special and so so influential in pop culture and to scientists, but also to artists.
And I have to say that this was a great thing, like to make some field research. And when Oscar approached me, I said to him, Oscar, let's change the words. Let's not say that we are making a catalog. Let's say we're making a book. Because in this way, we would open ourselves more into thinking of a book as an object in culture, and instead of just thinking of a catalog that has a special function. So that was, we had this in mind. It was always present. So yeah, so.
Exactly, yeah. So like we were talking like many times, just like we're doing today, and yeah, basically we're trying to think, how can this catalog not just be a catalog as like, you know, a document with the photos of the books presented, but as something that can exist beyond the project and have almost its own life. So that's how we started like researching the archetype of a sci-fi book with like really big fonts and so crazy graphics and visuals.
And they always like, almost always they're like cheaply printed, you know, this kind of a paper stock. It's called paperback. Perfect binding, blue binding, soft cover, with a logo, a crazy logo most of the time, with blurbs behind.
Yeah, and even some little quirky things. There would be some of them that had like pictures in the middle, right? Like there will be a break in the stories, and the paper changes, or you know, there's this different kind of shiny part to it. So that's kind of like our research phase at the beginning, and then as I was looking personally, like some sort of figure that will represent the entire show, I started arriving at the concept of the circle. The circle as this figure that represents so many things, and whether in science or in art. For example, in this case, the Voyager golden record, the one that was sent to outer space to communicate to potential alien intelligences about things from Earth. There's a fruit fly lab from NASA. Always this weird uses of the circle to represent a lot of information, a lot of data into a symbolic shape.
I also remember, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I remember very well when you explained to me for the first time what was speculative design, because I had not really heard so much about it, and you explained it to me as being this connected circle where everything was fitting itself.
Yeah, it's like it's sort of like a portal, or like, you know, an opportunity for different futures. Particularly when we're talking about interspecies, this concept of entanglement, where all of the species can, you know, we are all connected to every other organism on Earth. And so it became like this kind of mystical figure. We even found it in like really old sci-fi books, the concept of the circle, and then so that really inspired us to like start thinking, okay, what kind of illustrator do we want for this book?
Because we didn't want to stay in this kind of you know, sci-fi book from the 70s kind of thinking, okay, that was already done. But our challenge was more to think of the sci-fi as a genre that has different elements, but how to turn this into something contemporary, something of today. You know, so we were really thinking that it was very important to think about the cover first, and to think about someone who we could commission to actually make an artwork for it. So we really researched a lot. We had a long list until Oscar actually showed me the work by Sammy Stein.
Yeah, Sammy Stein actually is a friend of a friend. And I met also at a art book fair maybe a couple of years ago. And I was really impressed by his use of graphics. In like, he comes more from a experimental comics, experimental graphic novels. but he's really interested in sci-fi. So he sent us this round of images. There's the 3 top ones with, and all I remember telling him is we want a circle, we want like something that represents species, biotechnology, the entanglement, human and non-human. So these were sort of like his reaction to that brief. And we discussed about it, and we thought something like this one would be interesting, except for the fact that the last version has different animal eyes instead of 3 human eyes. So
and we also thought about the circle as this kind of it's always present in nature, right? So it's like as if you would look into a microscope. So the circle, the petri dish, the microscope, the cell, so it's always this idea of the circle, of looking at something close and from the outside to the inwards, and from inwards to the outside.
Exactly. Yes, definitely. That kind of aesthetic was, starting to inspire us. And so at the end of the day, we used this graphic as well in the actual exhibition. It's really enlarged version of that on the wall. Because there were some books included in the show on the sound of crickets, a book on bats, a book on the dodo, mushrooms, and all different sorts of species. So we continue our research into what other things make a sci-fi paperback so special, looking at these kind of examples by Octavia Butler, Solaris, Ecotopia, and there's always like a very interesting use of typography. There's also like certain type of paper that is used, certain type of like printing,
certain type of images within the images. So it's not just stories, but usually they're also charged by certain way of working with the text and the images, and how they interact within the book.
So you should tell them about this one. Didn't you find this one?
Yeah, I found it on the street actually. So I'm a professional book collector. So every time I see a book lying on the street, I just have to grab it and see if I want to take it home or in the studio. And so this one is one of those. And I remember opening it. I mean, of course I knew it was a science fiction book, but I remember opening exactly in this spread and saying, oh my God, what is this? I like this idea of surprise, that it had like 2 different papers, and that I didn't really understand what this image was about. It was more of a texture. And I was really drawn to it because it has this mystery. It was not illustrating something, but rather giving me the chance of actually imagining what the story or the novel could be about. And I remember I was super excited, and I was sending pictures to Oscar and saying, Oscar, this we really have to take in consideration. Like, what if we suddenly start playing with images that are kind of that remind us of other worlds and other paper and foldouts? And so what happens? Because this is actually breaking the story, this is actually breaking the story in the story. So I was really excited about finding this.
Yeah, so it was a very, I would say that's a pivotal point in our decision for the catalog, because that's when we started thinking how we incorporate like the imagery of the different projects into the book itself.
And we shouldn't forget also that it's 17 artists. So we had to find a way of including all of them in the same level. So how could they all take the same involvement into the book and not just being like a picture of the book, right? And also we Oscar and I, we really discuss often like, how can we actually show books in books? That's something which is always really difficult. First of all, because of the size of them, and because books are things that you actually have to activate. So you have to become an active user of the object in order to understand it. So that was always in our minds as well, right? Like trying to find this balance between involving the artist, showing the work, making this book not a catalog, but something else. So it was always this discussion of how do we show the material within this structure of the science fiction book.
Yeah, and also even speaking about the 17 main books selected, that's something else. Like we included that in the book, 17 alternative realities sort of stamp, which came directly as an influence from this book by Carl Sagan, The Dragons of Eden, which is incredible. You know, it's a book about it's a book where Carl Sagan speculates on the evolution of human intelligence. And it has this large, just nice stamp, and it's even a foldout. So that already was feeding on all of these ideas starting to come together. Foldout with graphics. And then in terms of like the typography, we arrived at this special typography from a Polish foundry. It's called Commune Display. And it just sort of reminded me of this sort of strange language that I found in a book I have. It almost looks, if you look from far away, it starts to look like shapes rather than text.
And we also thought, like, how do we maintain the mystery within the book? So how can the font help us keep this mystery within the publication? So. Yeah.
So this was like the first, like one of the really first iterations on the cover and back cover. One of the decisions that you see here that was not talked about before is the color. The green color actually is an homage to Eduardo Katz, who is he coined the term bio-art, and in the late 90s had this concept of GFP bunny, which is the idea of like inserting a certain type of gene on a regular rabbit that would make it glow green under UV light. So that was extremely controversial at the time, and even the bunny's name is Alba. So that is a very important moment in the sort of history of like when artists come in and start to alter genetics or the code of life and organisms. So I also included that green in the poster, the main poster of the show. And as you saw started thinking about using that color in the cover.
And every time when I'm working on a project, I work with like small papers, and I always create a folder. So this is the Interspecies Futures folder. And in this talk, we thought it would be very interesting to show bits and pieces before showing you the real catalog. So for example, here you can see the first introduction featuring all of the list of all of the artists. So we and Oscar really tried a lot, like how can we bring the structure into reminding you that, you know, when you hold it in your hands, what is this? What do I have in my hands? Is this a novel? Is this what is it? Like this moment of mystery. So these are some of the sketches I made. And another thing which was really an interesting moment in our conversation was that we wanted to come up with a new logo for the book, a fictional logo. So what if this book was published by some press that doesn't exist or could exist? So we made a lot of like different drawings and iterations on this, and we came up with this one, which is on the left, which if you see it closely, it actually reminds you of if. It's like an I and an F, but it's also like a human being with multiple arms, or like an octopus. So we thought this would really fit within our decision of taking this as a logo. And also the green, you know, there's many greens, but how we wanted to have a green which actually, as the bunny, kind of was shining and was shimmering. So I told Oscar that we should definitely do it with silkscreen. So the book has like many different techniques of how it's printed. So the cover is actually a gray paper. Then the white is silk screen. Then comes this green, which is like a silk screen 2 times, so that it has this glow. And then we have the silver sticker, which I made like a stamp. So I stamped each of the stickers and yeah, place them one by one. So there's these elements which slowly kind of came together by all of our discussions. Oh yeah, and something that's also super interesting is to see that in the cover we're actually not using Simon Stein's it's Simon Stein's drawing, but it's just the core, it's just the circles. And then on the back we actually have like the actual figures. So we thought it's like looking through the book, as if you would cut the book and you could see behind the pages and see then the creatures. So it's like these holes, you know, that you could maybe go through, because Oscar and I consider books to be like portals that takes you to other dimensions and other worlds. So that's why we took the decision of leaving these circles without any drawings as a cover.
Nice. Yeah, so here's a couple more pictures, 17 alternative realities, and a little description of each story in just like 2 words each, 2 or 3 words. So also, like, even with this one, have this like the sense of when you go to a secondhand bookstore and you grab a sci-fi and you immediately go to the back to understand a little bit more about it, because that's the moment when you decide, okay, I have to take that, you know.
Yeah. These are just like some shots of the process. And to me, it was very important to always jump from doing something digital and then going back to analog. So in the studio, that's how I really work. For example, Oscar and I were saying that a sci-fi book cannot be thin, you know, it has to have a volume. So to me, it was super important, like, to try to see how to create this object. And so I always go like doing something in the computer and then print it out, then try it out, and then discuss it with Oscar. And here you can see, for example, on the left, that we have a spread with the fish. And then we have this line as if it was like an archaeological book, or like if the book would be an archaeological object. You know, it is like a scale. And then when we thought about scale, Oscar and I were saying, okay, actually, that's really, really important. We really have to take in consideration that all of the books have to be 1-to-1 scale. So Oscar is like super organized, and I really like this about him, because then suddenly he sent me this, you know, this like beautiful ordered page where I could really understand, okay, yeah, because I didn't have the books in my hands, Oscar did. So he sent me this, and then we understood, okay, then within the book itself, we have to take in consideration that the biggest book within the book is the Dodo book, for example, and then go on from there. Because Oscar and I were speaking all the time about scale. So, you know, the book, it has to fit within the hands within the human within the world, and so on, you know, look, what happens with scale. So that's why scale to us was also an element that was present the whole time. When we were thinking about the design of the book. And the green was always present, but was not the main color at the beginning. We also tried, I also tried different things. I don't know, I was always thinking about blue, water, life, green. But we thought these books would remind us of another publishing house that I have now not in mind, but something else, more about literature instead of being so much.
It's that's called Fitzcarraldo Editions.
Exactly.
From the UK. Yeah, so this was one of the first versions that Claudia tried on her own, and in the end, maybe it was a bit closer to an aesthetic that it was maybe more non-fiction than fiction. Because in fiction, there's a little bit of more, especially in sci-fi, there's a bit more like playfulness with the typography. It's a bit more bold and more eccentric even.
And so that was great, because, for example, I was showing this to Oscar, and then I was saying, okay, Oscar, now you try something. And then it was really like a ping pong all the time. We were like really sharing all the time our ideas, and really discussing why would something work best than other, without feeling that, you know, I was never afraid to tell him what I was thinking in the process. That made it fun as well.
Yeah. And then there's also one very special moment during the research, which was this historical document. So in the beginning of the book, I open up with an essay on, with a mention on this, about this book that you're looking at right now. So this book is from 1665 and it's titled Micrographia by Robert Hooke, who was a very experimental scientist who, I believe he was, Isaac Newton hated him, and there is a rumor that he destroyed the portrait of Robert Hooke because he was so jealous of him. That's why nobody really knows about him. So in this book, Micrographia, he used a very early prototype of a microscope, and for the first time observed very tiny insects or parts of plants, and decided to blow them up at like really gigantic scale. So the most famous section of the book is the foldout of the Flea, which is when people saw, this is the first time people see a tiny insect in this scale, and it was like a monster. It generated waves of, like, you know, amazement, fear. Like it was just an insane moment. So we believe that this, we also wanted to pay an homage to this moment with the way we portrayed the books within our book, and you will see that, you see what we need. Yeah, so this one, the GIF is not working here, but this is how it normally appears, and then this is what happens when you open it up.
So that is when we came to the conclusion that we should actually play with the micro and the micro, and to include foldouts in the book. So every story and every artist gets a foldout, full color, within the spreads, within the stories of the book. And I created for each artist also a texture. You will see later on, but on the back of each foldout here, you can see, there's always a texture I created with details of each one of the artist's artworks. So I kind of like zoomed in as if I was a scientist and created these textures. And then you can basically open each of these spreads, and it reveals the book. And we're just showing actually the cover of the book. We're not showing the content. These are one of the first sketches I made of these foldouts. And if you go back, Oscar, please. We also call that how to integrate or how to divide the book within the book. So as I said before, on the left, you have the title of the book, the artist, and underneath it's like a small teaser. So we wanted to create like a teaser of each of the stories. So you want to read further on and discover what each of the stories is. Oh, and we also decided on having a background that was like a, how do you say this? Like, on color, like the background.
You want to say in Spanish?
Sí, como el degradado.
Oh yeah, like a gradient, gradient background, yeah.
Yeah, so we wanted to use a gradient as a background because of its connection to archaeology. Like sometimes when you go to museums or you look at archaeological books, there's always, like, I don't know, an Aztec mask, and then behind you have a gradient, like kind of giving it the importance of the object. So I wanted kind of like to give the importance of each of these beautiful books. Yeah. And this, oh yeah, and within the book, this is printed in a super glossy, thin 40-gram paper, which is like really beautiful because if you flip throughout the book, you get this paperback feeling, and suddenly you get this like really shiny, thin, colorful prints. And that's exactly the feeling I got as I found this first paperback I showed you with the images. I got this feeling of, oh my God, what is this? That's exactly why we decided it should be another paper, and it should be printed that way. And this is also some of the sketches I made just to try out the scale, you know, so how to try out the scale. And as I was showing this to Oscar, Oscar said, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, the texture behind, but you should try to kind of push it forward. Like, how can you make other textures? And that's when I said, oh my God, it was like challenging to hear this from him. And that's when I started to develop these other like palimpsests of like different layers within layers to create the textures that you will see at the end in the book. This was also quite an important moment in my research. And this was also like this book hunt. I was walking to my studio, and when I was walking there, I found a book on the floor. And the title of the book is something like The Wonders of This World. It was published in 1980s. And as I opened it, I saw these pictures of zooms of nature, you know. I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what Oscar and I are talking about. Like, I should definitely show this to Oscar. So I came to the studio and I started to make scans of some of these illustrations of these photographs. And yeah, maybe you can show the next slide. And then we decided that we should include these zooms into the publication. So you will see these are some pictures of how these foldouts are lying in the studio. Just wanted to show you a bit like how we started. And so there you go. So these textures were then scanned and converted to black and white, and they serve as separations within the big sections of the book. So you see here on the left one of the scans and how we or how I integrated it into the chapters of the books. Yeah, this one as well.
And what I like about them too is that they could be pictures from the 50s, 60s, but they're, depending how you manipulate them, they just look completely alien, you know?
Exactly, you don't really know what it is, and more when it's black and white, right? Because you don't really recognize some of the shapes. So that's one of the pictures in color and in black and white. And then speaking about like things that, you know, look alien, well, the book also looks a bit alien in itself. If you kind of fold out all these foldouts, then you get this kind of like weird arms, and then you get new connections within the book. To us, it was important to create like new connections within the connections, you know, like how to give new layers within the layers, and also like how do the different interests of the artists communicate with each other. There you can see one of the textures, the Tiger Tennis project, and how it opens up. And then that's exactly the same image as the left, but it's mirrored. I also wanted to play with the idea of mirror, because in nature, there's always this like doubling, mirroring, science fiction as well, like what's real and what's not, different timings. So mirroring was something that will come again within the book in a different way, but you will see it. Here, there's another example. So each of the artists gets its own full color double spread. And this is actually, well, all of these foldouts were hand folded by me in the studio. So imagine there's like 120 books by 17. It's like many, many foldouts. So it took quite a while, but I really wanted this to be part of the book. And so we're almost there. Yeah.
Yeah. So and this next part is also quite interesting and is very serendipitous. When I was looking at the kind of sci-fi paperback style books that I have with me, I noticed that I use some things as bookmarks, like for example, a receipt, or sometimes a business card. And it's also, that's like a very interesting aspect of like secondhand books. Many times I've bought like secondhand book that has a train ticket inside, or some other kind of ephemera that the previous owner had. And when we were starting to think about how is this, this catalog going to live beyond the show, obviously it serves the purpose of representing all the books from the show and the thesis, but we decided to make it in a format that is a classic, not a classic, but a sci-fi paperback. Imagine if this book appears in the future in some secondhand bookstore. What kind of things is going to carry with it from the previous owner? So came up with this concept where the actual forward to the book, to the project, is presented as a receipt that somebody forgot in the book. So this is like the Center for Book Arts. The Interspecies Futures catalog is the sale transaction. It's a $20 book, has the balance and everything. And in the back, just like when you turn around to a receipt and you see maybe like the return policy, that is the actual essay from the executive director of Center for Book Arts, Corina Reynolds. And the other thing is develop this also fake sort of ads from who knows what year. In this case is fictional 4D bioprinting advertisement that has also like this kind of QR code that if you actually like scan it, it will lead you to the website of the event in the Center for Book Arts page.
And maybe in 20 years, this QR code is not existing anymore because this technology is not working. Or no, we tried also to speculate how will this actually be? Would someone actually have access to this? Like if we would find a floppy disk right now, we would have to buy a machine that makes us this information available to us. So what would then happen?
Yeah. So we're definitely playing with like the position of this book in a timeline that is beyond our control. And another part that's quite interesting about the catalog is the appendix section. So there are some essays from guests like Douglas Dixon, Alexander Daisy Ginsburg, Thomas Thwaites, and also my own essay that connects to these different figures in the index section. And Claudia had the idea of, maybe you want to explain this part.
Yeah, like Oscar and I wanted to have the index, the appendix of images, not at the end of the book, as you would actually maybe find it, and also not beside each essay, because usually you find the essay and then you find like a small column with the images that refer to what's been said in the essay. But we thought it would maybe be more interesting to have this as a section in the middle of the book where we would have all of these references kind of mixed together. So we wouldn't have them like 1, 2, 3, but actually we would have them set up in a way where new relationships could be actually made through looking at these images. And then at the end, we have the list of, or actually the key to these images, but not the other way around. So this is really great because you find many different connections that if they would be actually ordered within each of the essays, well, maybe they would not be evident. So there's here again this idea of serendipity and what can happen within the selection of images in the book.
So this part is towards the end of the book because we wanted to preserve the first 90% of the book as a regular sci-fi anthology. So there's an introduction to the anthology, there's 17 stories, and then there's an appendix or an index of like images referenced and sources referenced. And then there's also a small moment. There's a couple more moments in the book. This one is for a photo shoot that we did with the actual books here in my apartment, actually, just a few weeks ago. Just someone, my wife and a friend, handling all of these books to give another sense of like scale and the physicality of them.
Also, some of the objects that actually accompany the books. Some of them also have objects.
Yes. And yeah, this is a biography section. And here are some other images of close-ups of the book, which I can't believe Claudia did, because it looks like a real like book from mass production, but you made it all, you know, in your studio.
And this is just a dummy. Yeah. I couldn't believe the moment I held it in my hands. I was like, it's finally here. Yeah.
And finally, at the end, there's this moment where there's a prediction of like what kind of next wave of stories are coming in a future anthology. So in this case, would be instead of organic to organic, you know, human to other species. There will be in the next 5 years more of a concentration between the organic world and the artificial intelligence or silicon-based or mineral-based world. And then Claudia had the idea of like including that exhibit, the exhibit A, B, C of this prediction in a section of the book where it's all inverted. So it's all black and the images are inverted.
So it's again this idea of kind of mirroring or making a kind of like twist, because this is something that hasn't happened yet, but that it could happen. So
yeah, and this is like, these are kind of recent references, like the Neuralink chips that Elon Musk is putting in pigs' brains or monkey brains, you know, like connecting more like, yeah, silicon-based or altering intelligences with different technological methodologies.
right.
So you want to read this one, Claudia?
I think you should, because I cannot see the text completely.
Okay, yeah, so sorry. So in fact, the book, we include in the book, it was very important for us to include this phrase by Ulises Carrion, Mexican conceptual artist, but also one of the most important people in the history of artist books, as he opened other books and so in the Netherlands in 1975. He was a very important archivist, and this is a very unusual quote that we rescued from a video. He says, "I firmly believe that every book that now exists will eventually disappear, and I see here no reason for lamentation. Like any other living organism, books will grow, multiply, change color, and eventually die." So the incredible thing about this phrase is that it's coming from Ulises Carrion, who is spent a gigantic portion of his life into archiving documents and books. But to think that he understands that books at the end of the day are their own sort of organisms beyond your control, that they can change, that they can deteriorate, and maybe even disappear. To us, that was quite radical, and it was quite proper to include in this exhibition, which is all about organisms, and also thinking of the catalog as its own organism that will have its own life beyond the duration of the show. So the last image I'll show here is Claudia went to some bookstores in Berlin and just kind of like infiltrated the book in a shelf.
Meaning that we don't know where it will land, but it will surely have its own ways of operating in the future.
So that is this part of the talk, the conversation. And now Claudia is gonna showcase for the first time the a leaf through of all the entire book.
I have to connect my phone, so you have to be patient with me, please.
And by the way, everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to like write them on the chat. I'll be able to read them as we start exchanging thoughts with Claudia.
Can you see it properly?
Yes, yes, I can see the.
Okay. So we're very excited that the first time we showcase the book, and I will just go through it, and then Oscar, you can just compliment what we're looking at or say something else.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so here we go.
Yeah, so that is the illustration that we commissioned. And then we have the logo, this sort of strange Interspecies Futures publication logo. The Ulysses Carrion quote that we share in the end. And yes, it started adopting all of these kind of traditional formatting of a sci-fi, as you can see. And this is the first story. So what we did also is like we asked the artists, either ask them to create new text to complement their books, or we took some of the traditional description of their works and adapted it into this story format. So all of them come with a teaser on the left, and then a length from, let's say, 2 to maximum 8 pages each story.
And the colors also reflect on each story. So this is about termites, so that's why it's...
Yeah, so like a color of the earth. The Tiger Penis project comes with 2 books, so those are represented.
This one was one of the biggest books.
Yeah, a guide to yeah, this is the book from the Institute of Critical Zoologists, so that's one of the largest ones that we have. This is the Pink Chicken Project, which Claudia actually helped conceptualize and create in Berlin. This one is Non-Flowers by Thomas Paus, and we included even one of the objects next to the book.
It's here.
Yeah, one of the non-flowers for scale. And some of the books have like special elements, like even this one that you're showing has a USB drive. So you can also hear the sound of the spider orchestra, the arachnid orchestra in this case. This one comes with a card that has a link to a video of the project. So we thought interesting to include those kind of elements that enhance and augment the experience of the books. So what was amazing also is there's a lot of like original stories here. In fact, Christopher Oram, one that's coming up, his entire story is completely bonkers. It's insane, and I love it because it's original and it's told from a personal point of view. This is by Sasha Spasol with a USB. The music with crickets that she collaborated with. This is by Hotels and Biogenesis, by Hypothetical Studios. Yeah, this is Mushrooming Ritual, part of a larger collection of queer ecology books. And finally, this section is where we get into the special features and special interviews. That's when Claudia starts using these special backgrounds. So this is speculative zoology, in which we portray an original essay by Dougal Dixon, father of speculative zoology, and an interview. This part that is coming up is with Thomas Thwaites. So he includes a never published before epilogue to his Goatman story, the Goatman book. So this epilogue doesn't exist anywhere else except in his own laptop. So he shared it with us, and we're publishing it for the first time. There's also an interview with him. And this one is a really extensive interview with Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg. A lot of incredible questions, a lot of incredible ideas coming from her, and her relationship with books and encyclopedias and taxonomy. So we had a really interesting conversation, especially like we talk about the Codex Seraphinianus, which apparently was a really important book in her formation. Yeah, so this one, for example, this is Claudia randomly placed the receipt in this section. I don't know what page is that, like.
That's page 167.
167. So when people buy the catalog, this is gonna be included in any random page. So this part here is the appendix of all the images mentioned in the interviews or essays. This is the special mention of a predictive moment in the future. Here are some images of photo shoot of the books being held by models.
And I think this is nice that there's hands and hands, so it talks about scale.
Exactly. This last section is the biographies, and this is also very common in sci-fi anthologies, that at the end of the book you have the biographies, the sources of the stories. The book data is where we are including. Here is where we have all the information on the books included in the show, how many were made, when they were created. There's a bibliography and the sources of the images. And yeah, here's an example of that sort of like fictional like advertisement of 4D bioprinting system, which will also be included in the when you purchase the book on some random page. Finally, including the imprint, of course, thanking the Center for Book Arts for the creation of this catalog. And yeah, that's the prediction at the end. And the back cover has the 17 stories stamp and the original drawing by Sami Stein. So that is the full experience.
Yeah.
It was a record. I mean, it was kind of record, right? Like we did it in just a few months. And it was quite involved, and we're really happy with the results.
Yes. So I guess, I don't know, maybe we should go through the questions, and if someone else has more questions, they can just add in the chat.
Yeah, I received a question. Paula from MSDM Studio says, very nice book. Looking forward to getting my hands on it. How do you bind the inserts? Doesn't look hardbound. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. It's called perfect binding. So it's all about having the right glue. I mean, I'm actually not going to bind them all by myself in the studio. This is just the dummy. But if you use at least 3 layers of binding glue, it has to be an elastic glue so it doesn't break, or it doesn't break when you open the book, then it holds perfectly. Yeah. And as you see, I made it a bit smaller here so that people know that they can actually unfold the pages. Yeah.
I think people are maybe thinking about different questions, but do you have any questions, Claudia, even?
Do I have any questions?
Yeah. No, I mean, in general, like any more like thoughts that maybe we didn't cover during
well, I think the thought, or how I can close myself, is that working on this book really opened me opened me a new world that I want to keep on exploring. You really pushed my belly button, and I want to get to know this world, this interspecies world a bit better. And it was a real pleasure working with you. And I also think, it gives a lot of food for thought, like how can books actually work today and in the future, and why is it still worth making books?
Yes. Yes, I have a question here. So Ariel Wells says, beautiful work and presentation. Thank you. Can you share about some of the relationships between the section of foldouts that you found come together spontaneously? I would love to hear about how, once the book became physical, your experiences of it shifted.
The sections of foldouts that you found come together spontaneously. What does?
Maybe it's talking about the part where when you started like unfolding different ones, and then you saw new connections between them.
Oh yeah.
You were not anticipating maybe when we were conceptualizing that.
Actually, this was not thought from the beginning. It actually happened. The moment I was making this photo shoot that you saw throughout the presentation, I was opening them up and was like, oh my God, these are like arms. There was like a new dimension to it that you don't really fully appreciate until you have the final object in your hands. So this was kind of actually, well, it was not kind of, it was actually a surprise, which I thought opened like a new way of looking at it, and it was great. So yeah.
It also made me think about the foldout, because like we weren't, we didn't anticipate that. And also, like I told you before I called, like the first thing I would do when I get the book is like I want to unfold all of them,
Yeah, this is what happened.
Something else, like there's a playfulness. Kathy Lowry says, is the glue PVC? I also wanted to know about the method of book binding. It's fabulous that the book is a living thing, a biomorphic book. Wink.
Yeah, it's a cold PVC glue actually, and the method of binding. Well, actually, I do it really hands-on. I have a wood, and on that wood I place the book block, and then I press it, so it has to be really pushed together. And then I go. Actually, people or professional bookbinders do it with a special brush, but I have more tactility in my finger, so I actually do it with my finger. And so I place some of the glue, and I go like layer, but a bit thick, layer by layer, and until it gets transparent, I have to do like the second layer and so on, and at least 3 of them, so that it's stable. If not, it won't hold.
Also I wanted to ask you about the printing of the foldouts. You use an Indigo printer, right? Which I never heard of before.
Yeah, so I work really closely with the printers and bookbinders that I know around here. And this technique or printing method, which is called Indigo Printing, it's like an offset, a digital offset, meaning you can produce from one to many, and it can print in silver, Pantone colors, etc. So it's a new technology, let's say, which brings out the colors really like amazingly. And I've been working with them because I also have a publishing house, so I work a lot with books, and I like to, because actually the book, like the commission was to design the book, right? Not to make the production of the book. And it was a moment in our conversations where I was just like, Oscar, I think I have to also kind of produce it here. Would that be possible? Because I'm a bit of an obsessive in that way. I wanted to really know which paper we were going to use and which ink and which bookbinder and everything.
Yeah, that to me that was like one of the most incredible things about working with you, that you have, once you have a certain vision, you really, it's important for you to have your hands on all the process, from the concept to the dummies, the prototypes, and to the actual production, because you have a very particular relationship with the books. Like I never thought how, like, because I am fascinated by books and by what they are, how they're constructed, how they're made. But I've never met someone so really richly connected to the book. From the concept to what it looks like, what it weighs, how it's constructed. So it was incredible to see you also work like that. To me, it was like so inspiring.
Thank you, Oscar. And I mean, you haven't held one copy in your hands yet. So when you do, I think you're gonna, it's gonna take you somewhere else. Yeah.
So Thomas, who's actually participating in the show with Non-Flowers, he says, "Great work, Oscar and Claudia. Thank you for the work and collaboration."
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. And Kathy says, "Hey, Thomas." Yeah, I saw him. And Kathy, who asked you about the glue, what kind of glue it was, says, "Thank you. Fingers do what brushes cannot." I look forward to holding the book in my hands.
That's true. And it's also important to say that it's in an edition of 120. So it's quite small edition. And the price is, it's $20, right?
Yeah, $20 is an incredible price for this book, which I think is something that Center for Book Arts does very, it's a very interesting thing they do, that I think no matter what the catalogs look like, they're always going to be that kind of price point. So it's very accessible. Yeah.
So Charlene asks if the cover is printed with Indigo printing method as well. No, the cover is silk screen printing because I really wanted to get like a full coverage and that the color was kind of like shining. So for this, it has to be either hot foil stamping or silk screen, and silk screen is more affordable. So that's why we went for silk screen. Do you have any recommendations for publishers and producers? Oh, I have many. There's thousands. But what's particular about producers is that in every country is different. Like New York has different stock papers than in Berlin, than in Mexico. So I would say like it's kind of like site specific. Which is great.
You're like super familiar with the Berlin scene, right? The publishing.
Yeah, in a way, it's quite big as well. But I mean, what can I say? The book world, but the publishers' independent book world is quite small. I guess everyone knows everyone. And if you would like any recommendations for any publishers within a specific topic, you can gladly write me an email, and I can send you maybe a list of some of my thoughts or recommendations. Yeah, Paula, get a book.
What would you say, Claudia, was the most difficult part of like this this project?
What was the most difficult part? I think the most difficult part was actually getting or gathering the whole material, right? Because we were working a bit like, I mean, we didn't have everything from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like in stages. So we had first some of the
stories,
some not. It was a word count. Then we had the illustration. It was like kind of a puzzle. Like
remember one of the hardest part was also that there were like 6 books commissioned for the show. So yeah, they didn't even exist when we started doing the catalog.
Yes.
Some of them actually we saw the final cover like maybe 2 weeks before the show started, you know.
We even changed the cover of several books like 2 or 3 times because it had changed.
Yeah, like even Thomas' book was like at some point was one way and it changed. Yeah. But we ended up using the one that we show in the presentation in the final show. And I think he has a new version. So it's also, even that freezes that moment, you know, this book is freezing that.
It's freezing that first step.
Yeah, and even the Pink Chicken project, like there's only an edition one of one, and that version is included forever in this book.
Yeah, it's like as well. That's why we always had in mind this archival or archaeological aspect of it. And yeah, it was also great working with the non-human nonsense. I had a pink chicken standing on my table, and we had fun.
Yeah, and yeah, what else do you think about? Because I know you've never worked with this kind of topic before.
No, never. I mean, my background, I mean, I'm a visual artist. I'm not a graphic designer. So in that way, my formation, or at least in the academy where I studied, no one was really like reaching towards these topics. It was more formal, let's say. And when you spoke to me about it, I was like, wow, this is like a parallel reality somehow. And to me, it was, you know, the making of the catalog was also a learning process. I learned a lot thanks to working with you and with all of these great artists. Like, it was really eye-opening, I have to say.
Yeah, and also remember that even when we were conceptualizing what kind of format is the catalog was going to be, there was I mean, it could have been anything, right? In the beginning, it could have been like just a regular catalog. Or
you said to me, do whatever you want, and I was like, really? You said you're free to do anything. So that was also great, because from the beginning on, everything was open.
Yes. Yeah. For me, it was very important that what kind of interpretation you have of this world, especially because you're not from this world, you know.
Right.
You're not in this circle of artists.
No.
So your interpretation for me is like more fresh, like more, you know, has a different value. But ultimately, you work because then a lot of the artists, the books that are included in the show, adopt different formats of different book archetypes, you know, like encyclopedia or scientific journal, investigative report, corporate catalog. So they're using this sense of author of, you know, which is something that Corina said recently in an interview, that when you see a book in a specific format, it has a certain intellectual authority. So you sort of believe, because of the format in which it comes, you for a moment believe that, you know, it's legitimate, you know, and then so
it kind of makes you recognize the shape of it, or at least like you recognize it because it already exists in the world. No? So the idea of encyclopedia has its own rules of operating. So when you see it, you kind of like recognize it, and it's not this, then you have this eureka moment when it suddenly shifts.
Yes.
And you see something else.
We have another question for you from Rita Bayon. Claudia, such a beautiful work you did. Was it easier for you to make this book as Oscar was super organized with the content?
I mean, he was not super organized from the beginning. We actually had like very different ways of like trying to organize ourselves. First of all, there's a time difference, right? Second of all, I first said, why don't we use a platform called Arena? So we started like exchanging there, and then basically almost 95% of our communication happened through Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, we Skyped a lot, or let's say we Skyped maybe once a week. Exactly, we said we should Skype once a week. That was our rule, right? And sometimes we would not even talk about the catalog, but we would speak about the artists. I mean, I was really involved in the exhibition. Like I was, Oscar was telling me every detail, like not only the book, but also the curation. Like every time he got a new book, he showed it to me, how the exhibition space would look. We kind of like exchanged a lot of things in different levels. It was not only the book. And actually, I mean, that was really great because then we said, like, how can we actually structure ourselves? And then we opened a Dropbox and we worked with Dropbox. But actually what Oscar has that I don't have is that he's very good at making this kind of like, for example, when he placed all of the books in scale in a timeline. And I was like, wow, that's marvelous. That's great. Or for example, he also made a kind of an index like with every content and how many words. And so this really helped me, of course, as a designer, let's say, to be able to at least know what I was going to work with. But what was really the greatest part of this whole thing was it was not just about the catalog. It was actually in different level how we communicated. It was actually everything that surrounds the exhibition, not just the book.
Yeah. And no, and also you have to add the fact that we made this during the pandemic year, So yeah. The entire catalog and also 6 of the books for the show were developed during the pandemic year. So in the middle of having lockdowns and a moment in time when like most communication happened on, via video conference or Instagram. So it's also a reflection of the way our process developed is a reflection of the time in which we did it.
And also a reflection of trust. So you trusted me, and you haven't even held a copy in your hands, but it's there. So it was also this relation of trust and be able also to be direct in our communication. Like we never like we were very honest in how we spoke about things. When something was not working, I was just showing you, Oscar, I think, I don't know, maybe there's another way, or likewise, you said that to me. So that's why we could really develop and this possible, all of these shapes were kind of like suddenly together.
Yeah, and I think it's because maybe like the commonality between you and me is that we believe in a conceptual integrity, right? From point of view of the topic, all the way down to the material. So that's why sometimes we decided to make a change. If it conceptually made sense, then we both approved it immediately,
Right, like to us, the book is not just a container of information, but it's something else.
Yeah. But
yeah.
I think we cover a lot of things now, and I just can't wait to hold one. Yes. Maybe you make a little pile on the in the show, maybe like the last few days, like a nice pile. So it's gonna be so cool.
Yes, and I'm really, really thankful. Thanks again as well to the Center for Book Arts for empowering and bringing all these projects to life. And thank you, Oscar. I guess that's it.
Yeah, I think I want to thank everyone. Yes, like Michelle says, thank you, Claudia and Oscar. Inspiring concept, creation, publication. Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. I know you're joining all the way from California. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. We're so excited to share this with the world.
Yes.
And so last thing is like it's still available for pre-order if anyone is interested.